Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I am Mike Barner. He is Kirien Sprecher, and we come to you every Wednesday to help you get the information that you need to win your fantasy basketball leagues. Kirien, it's our last show of the season. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty awesome season in all. Hopefully some of you guys won championships. I'm still fighting in one league that's still going on, if you believe that or not. But happy that we had so many loyal followers, and thank you to everyone that tuned in this season.
Yeah, definitely. Our first season of Kirien and I hosting this Wednesday show, and we couldn't thank all of you enough for making it a great first season. Hopefully the overlords will bring us back. There's been no nasty emails that Kirien and I have offended anybody, so we're in pretty good shape there. Now, we're going to do things a little differently today because there are so few of you that are still playing in leagues, so we're going to skip the usual news and notes. I know you were all hoping for 76ers Wizards breakdown tonight. The big game on the Dodgers. There's this guy, Luca. I think he's returning to Dallas too. But what we're going to do is first we're going to give out our fantasy awards of the season. And then the second half of the show, we're going to talk about some guys that we are targeting or avoiding for next season. So we're already looking ahead. So first, let's start off with the fantasy basketball awards. Very prestigious. I'm sure all the players in the NBA cannot wait to hear if their name is called. Now, not all of these awards are good awards, but let's start things off with a positive one. Breakout Player of the Year. Kirien, who is your Breakout Player of the Year?
I'm going to go with Ivica Zubac, center for the Clippers. His preseason ADP was around 90, and he's finishing as a top 20 guy despite being, a huge negative in the free throws and three-point department, as is pretty typical with big men. Missed only 2 games this season, and that's been a huge reason why he's been so valuable. But also he's seen major increases in his per-game stats. His previous career highs were 11.7 points, 9.9 rebounds, and 1 assist, and 28.6 minutes. This season, he's averaging 32.6 minutes. That was a big thing that we were talking about at the beginning of the season. We didn't think that was going to last. It lasted. Almost 33 minutes per game. Bumped his points to 16.6, rebounds to 12.6, and assists to 2.6. So just increases across the board, playing more minutes, getting more points, grabbing more boards, getting more assists. Sometimes, you always talk about those per 36 guys, right? Daron Sharp, like once they get 32 minutes, 33 minutes, all their stats are going to explode. But sometimes when you get more minutes, then the rest of your game kind of deteriorates because you're tired, you're on the court more. Teams scout you. Zubac, complete opposite. He gets the minutes. The production increases too. I like this as I think Zubac is the perfect breakthrough candidate, right? Like you talk about Dyson Daniels or Josh Hart. Like Josh Hart has had times in his career where he was valuable in fantasy and sometimes where he wasn't. So I felt like he kind of has shown that. And then obviously not to this level. This season, he's on another level. And then Dyson Daniels has the potential. So maybe they broke through this season, but I feel like Zubac, this is his age 27 season. Going into the season, we all knew, or we thought we knew what we were getting. We're getting 12 points, 10 boards, playing 75 games. But he broke through this wall this season. And that's why I want to give him this award. He broke through and you don't really see that at this, at this stage of a career, and I just wanted to give a big shout out to him. I think he's probably on a lot of championship rosters this season just because of how many games he played and how strong his production was all season.
Yeah, great option. Great pick there. Zubac was incredible. We talked about me specifically. I was worried that the Clippers were going to be competitive this season. They sure proved me wrong because they've been great, and that certainly helped Zubac reach his full fantasy potential. Great pick there by Kirien. I am going to go with Dyson Daniels as my breakout player simply because his ADP was 139. He wasn't even drafted in most leagues. If he was drafted, he was a last round pick. Right now, he's got averages of 14.3 points, 5.8 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 3 steals, 1.1 3-pointers, and he's shooting 49.5% from the field. He was a massive contributor right off the bat. Through his first 11 games, he had 42 steals. So he wasn't drafted in your league and you got him on that first waiver wire run. I remember including him in my first waiver wire article of the season. He has proven to be a great value. So Dyson Daniels is my pick as breakout. He finally got the minutes with a change of scenery on the Atlanta Hawks. and he was great.
Yeah, and I don't see why he can't repeat this next year, right? Like we'll see what Atlanta does in the offseason. But pairing a defensive guard like that with an offensive guard in Trae Young seems like the ideal match if you're going to stick with Trae Young long term. And obviously, Daniels had an incredible season. And when I said like I didn't want to give it to him for breakthrough, like I just didn't want us to double up. Like Dyson Daniels is the clear number one option here. Just an incredible season that no one really saw coming.
Now, not like I said, not all awards are good awards. So let's get that trombone, the slide trombone out. This is the biggest disappointment of the season award. Kirien, you go ahead.
So I'm going to share it, and I'm going to share it with two of my favorite players in the league, Paolo Banchero and Jalen Johnson. They both got injured and derailed promising seasons. This is becoming a little bit of a trend for Jalen, which is concerning, but it's Paolo's like first major injury in the NBA. I still think insanely highly of both of these guys, but early season injuries or early career injuries can be tough to bounce back from and get back to that superstar form. I thought both of these guys would be top 20 fantasy contributors, if not even higher, on a ton of fantasy rosters. Given all of the injuries, they're both going to finish outside the top 100. So just disappointing for me because I had maybe too high of expectations for them, and injuries derailed them. I don't think they're bad basketball players. I just think they got to stay on the court to be fantasy superstars.
Oh, the silver lining with Banchero is at least he's been awesome during the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, especially last night he crushed the Hawks. I mean, he has been great down the stretch. The per game numbers were there for both of those guys. It's just like you said, the injuries were the reason that now I went with a guy who was a disappointment both because of injuries and because he stunk. So even when he was on the floor, he stunk. Our guy, Pinky P, Paul George, is my biggest disappointment of the season. He played in just 41 games, but the real reason why he was the biggest disappointment for me, even when he did play, he averaged 16.2 points per game. He shot just 43% from the field. He has had a lot of injuries. He's played 56 or fewer games in 5 of the last 6 seasons. Pinky P could not carry the 76ers when Joel Embiid got hurt. He got paid to come in and be a superstar. He couldn't even hold Norman Powell's water this season. Paul George, Pinky P, my biggest disappointment of the season.
I refuse to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers anymore this season. So we can
Now let's move on to our rookies of the year. Kirien, who is your fantasy rookie of the year?
It's a no-brainer here. I really wish I would have put my money where my mouth was before the beginning of this season because I thought this guy was the best player in this class. That is Stephon Castle. You look at Alex Sarr, you look at Risha Shea. They've both been pretty solid. Sarr is already an elite shot blocker. Risha Shea has established himself as, if nothing else, a solid 3-and-D guy for the rest of his career. Like he's established himself as a solid rotation player that has promise. We were kind of questioning whether either of these guys could stick in the league for 5 years, and I think they both more than proved that. But Stephon Castle is on another level this season. Castle he just makes it look so easy for such a young player. And obviously, the production was coming and going, ebbing and flowing. And then Wemby and De'Aaron Fox got hurt, and he got promoted to the starting lineup, and he just kind of took off. I think Castle is the clear king of this rookie class, and it wasn't particularly close.
Completely agree. I also had Stephon Castle as my fantasy rookie of the year. And what you like about Castle from a fantasy perspective is he stepped up when it mattered the most. Over the last 15 games, he's averaged 19.1 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1.33 pointers. Great fantasy rookie season from Stephon Castle. It took a couple of injuries to get him there at the end here, but it was a great finish to the season. So we've given out breakout player. We've given out biggest disappointment and rookie of the year. It's time for the most important award of the fantasy season, the fantasy MVP. Kirien, what do you got?
So I'm going to go pretty stale here. I'm just going SGA and or Jokic. If you had either of these, the likelihood of you winning money was very, very high. These guys were just head and shoulders above the rest. If you made me pick between the two, I'd have to go SGA just because Jokic missed that 5-game stretch at the end of March. So if you were in a points league, that might have been your championship. That might have been your first round of the playoffs. So that absence probably cost you. But he returned, and then you probably won the third place game anyways, or won the consolation bracket anyways. So if you were lucky enough to have, this second or third pick, obviously Wemby got hurt and derailed that, you probably did pretty well in fantasy this season. And the sheer just like dominance of having one of those guys on your team and knowing in fantasy, any sport, you don't know, but you know that Jokic and SGA are going to give you points. And so I just got to give him the MVP for that reason. We could talk for 30 minutes on what MVP means, right? Is it the best player? Is it the best player on the best team? Is it the guy that has the most value? I went generic here, and I just took the two best players in fantasy this season.
Yeah, you will get no argument from me about picking Jokic and or SGA as your MVP. The only downside with that is if you didn't get a top 3 pick, you probably didn't get any of those 3 guys.
Yeah.
But Jokic, awesome season. Maybe this, before I give my guy, let's talk about this weird situation with the Nuggets quickly, where they fired both their GM and their head coach yesterday, less than a week before the playoffs start. What did you make of that?
I am completely shocked. Ramona Shelburne, talked about it, or reshared an article that she posted in November. And based off of that article, we probably should have seen the writing on the wall. The Booth and Malone were not friends. They talked behind each other's backs. Shams said it was a cold war between those two. Shelburne said in that article in November, she basically was like, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter aren't living up to their contracts, and that's killing us. The only young player that stepped up is Christian Braun, basically throwing, Peyton Watson, Julian Strother, those guys under the bus. So we probably should have seen this coming, but it still was shocking to me. Michael Malone is probably, if I was a Bucks fan, if I was in the Bucks organization, bye Doc Rivers, bring me Michael Malone. I think he is a fantastic coach. I also thought Taylor Jenkins was a fantastic coach. So maybe I don't know anything. Just, I don't see how you can fire your coach and then be like, we're going to be better and ready to win a championship in 2 weeks. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So that's my 2 cents.
I completely agree. The timing on it is crazy and bizarre. I get getting rid of Booth because he really hasn't done a good job of building the depth on the team. They're even below the second apron. I mean, you have Jokic, you have a generational talent on your team. You got to at least get yourself a little closer to this. I believe they're like $5 million under the second apron or something like that. I mean, that's a role player. That's a guy you could have added at the trade deadline that would have helped a lot and taken some of this pressure off. I mean, they have DeAndre Jordan as their backup center. That's insane. The guy is 100 years old. I can see getting rid of Booth. Michael Malone, I'm with you. I don't understand getting rid of him. He's a fantastic coach, less than 2 seasons removed from winning a championship here. I thought that was completely bizarre.
And I totally agree. They probably could have spent more money and gone out and get a star, but they were talking about draft picks, and it's like, okay, in the last 5 years, you're drafting in the 20s and you hit one. Christian Braun has turned into a solid starter. So 1 in 5 in the range of 20 turning into a solid rotation player. I think that's pretty good hit rate, honestly. And then the talent drain from the team that won the championship, you're talking about losing KCP, who signed a massive deal, Bruce Brown, who signed a massive deal. Neither of those guys are living up to that deal. And then Jeff Green, no offense to Jeff Green, but he's not a difference maker. Sure, maybe in a game 5, he could hit a couple threes or something, but he's not one of these guys that's going to completely change the trajectory of your franchise and cause you to fire Michael Malone. I don't think anybody in their right mind can be like, Michael Malone got fired and Booth got fired because they didn't keep Jeff Green. That just seems kind of ridiculous.
All right, I'm going to get us back on the rails here, and I'm going to give my fantasy MVP for the season was my guy, Josh Hart. He had an ADP of 92. He was going outside the top 100 for a portion of the draft season. Right now, he's averaging 13.8 points, 9.6 rebounds, just under 6 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.1 3-pointers, shooting 52.5% from the field, and he has played in 76 games. We've given Josh Hart flowers a lot on this podcast. He is the man. We also want to give a tip of the cap here to Tibbs for playing Hart this much. We will see what Josh Hart looks like when he's 50 years old. Ask Luol Deng how it feels to get out of a chair right now. But Josh Hart, coming from around pick 90 to 100, is my fantasy MVP.
Yeah, and I think, we're talking about Dyson Daniels, Zubac, Josh Hart. These guys are true fantasy gold of this
Yeah.
season. These are the guys that were the difference makers. That 80-point difference in ADP and where they're finishing their season. That's what you need if you want to take home a fantasy championship. So
And
no,
anyone could have drafted them. That's
yes,
the key. With those
exactly.
guys that you're talking about, anybody could have drafted Daniels, Hart, Zubac. Anybody could have drafted them. It didn't matter if you didn't luck out and you got the 12th pick in a 12-team league, or you're in a 15-teamer and you got the 13th pick, something like that. You could have gotten these guys at any point. You could have taken them. You couldn't have gotten Wemby or Jokic or SGA or Luka, those kind of guys that late. So those are some great guys there. Some MVP of the fantasy season, Josh Hart. So now let's turn the page. Let's turn the page on this season, and let's start looking towards the 2025-26 season. Kirien and I are each going to talk about one guy that we will not draft. We will be avoiding them, and two guys that we will be targeting. Let's get the negative out of the way first. Kirien, who are you avoiding next season?
All right, so I already said I wasn't going to talk about the 76ers, so I won't be including 76ers, but just know that I will not be drafting any 76ers next year.
That's right. The official stance of the Wednesday episode is do not draft Joel Embiid. That is we have business cards, and it says that on the bottom. Kirien and I hand them out. It says Wednesday podcast host, do not draft Joel Embiid. So we don't have to mention that again. It's a given. From now until when we stop podcasting, which is hopefully long after Joel Embiid retires, we will never, ever, ever, ever recommend Joel Embiid. Okay, so now go ahead.
All right, and so now a guy that we can probably throw into the Joel Embiid category this coming season, it's probably here already, is LaMelo Ball. He's played more than 51 games only one time in his career. If he's still going at the, he was like a top 15 ADP. If he's still going in the first two rounds, there's no way I'm touching him. Even if he's being drafted around like the 50s, I may not even consider him. We already talked about the guys, Josh Hart, Derek White, Dyson Daniels. I would rather have those guys at pick 20, 25 than LaMelo Ball. Like that will be the easiest click of my life. Hell, I'd probably even take Christian Braun at pick 50 over LaMelo at this point. That might be more of a, I'd have to think about it. But LaMelo Ball, there's no way I'm trusting him to be, if you're, let's just say a 10-team league, 5 rounds, there's no way and you start 5 guys, there's no way I'm trusting him to be a starter because you just can't count on him to play in enough games to be worth that type of pick.
Here's a cautionary tale for you. I'm in the FSGA, the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association's Champions League. I had Jalen Johnson, who obviously got hurt. I had LaMelo Ball, Cam Johnson, and 3 guys on the Raptors, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Jakob Poeltl. Awesome regular season. Didn't win either rounds of the playoffs. So there's your cautionary tale about LaMelo Ball. I mean, obviously, drafting 3 Raptors and having them stink the whole season probably wasn't the best idea, although I don't think any of us would have thought the Raptors would have been this bad. Injuries definitely killed them there. But, yeah, that's LaMelo Ball. I drafted him. When I drafted him, I think I had the 10th pick, and I think I got him on the turn there at the end. I didn't feel good about it. I loved it in the beginning of the season when he was doing awesome. We talked about selling high on him many times on this podcast, and that turned out to be fruition. I probably will not draft him next season. The only way I would even consider drafting him is, let's just say that the Hornets get Cooper Flag, and they have Cooper Flag, Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, and Mark Williams in a bad Eastern Conference. That's a team that could probably challenge for a play-in spot. And if they're actually trying, maybe we'll get LaMelo to play 60 games. I'm not saying he's going to play 70, but can we get him to play 60? Can we get him to play somewhere between 60 and 65 and be playing at the end of the season when it matters the most? That might be the only, but if they're looking like one of the worst teams in the league again, let's say they get, I don't know, the 4th or 5th pick and they don't get one of those difference maker guys. Yeah, I can't make any arguments for LaMelo Ball. For me, I'm going with Ja Morant, who I am officially dubbing Derrick Rose 2.0. Okay. This will count as the Bulls minute. We loved, as Bulls fans, all of us loved Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose was an elite player because he had an ability to get to the rim like no one else in the league. Not a very good 3-point shooter. It wasn't pretty. He made some, yes, but his talent was getting to the rim. Well, guess what? A little guy who goes to the rim all the time, more often than not, gets hurt. Now, Allen Iverson was kind of an exception, and even he had his injury issues. But Ja Morant reminds me, and this Grizzlies team reminds me so much of those Derrick Rose Bulls teams where they're deep, they're talented, but Ja Morant just can't stay healthy. Now, same issue this season. He's had great stats when he's played, except he's shooting 30.7% from three. He's not a very good three-point shooter. He's played in just 48 games this season. He has never played in more than 67 games in his career. Awesome player. Awesome talent. He has the off-court issue kind of things. I don't know if everybody saw this new – he got banned for the gun celebration, so now he's throwing grenades, fake grenades, into the stands. He did that last night. Not a great idea. So the off-the-court makeup thing worries me too. I will not be drafting Ja Morant in any leagues next season. Let someone else deal with that injury concern.
And you've talked about the Derrick Rose comparison before, and I like it. It makes sense to me. I think the only real difference I see is Derrick Rose played in a lot of games in his first 3 seasons, and then he had that first major injury, and then it was just never the same. And LaMelo has just, like I was talking about with Paolo and Jalen, when you have that early career injury and you're a superstar and you rely on athleticism and you can't get back to being the best athlete anymore, and like that seriously impacts you. And I think LaMelo and Ja are trending in that same direction, where if Ja isn't the greatest athlete on the court, he's not as impactful as a player. That's just a fact. And obviously, maybe he developed a 3-point shot later in his career. Derrick Rose ended up having a long career, but he never was playing, 75 games and averaging 20 points. So if Ja Morant wants that longevity, he's just going to have to be on the court more often and get back to being the best athlete. And when he's been on the court this season, he's proven that he can be. We talk about a guy like Kawhi. He is super. We talk about LeBron James, longevity. Kawhi coming back from multiple devastating knee injuries and then still looking like a superstar player is incredible. I always feel like this is the one where he's gonna revert back to that. But Ja Morant, LaMelo Ball, definitely fine staying away from both of those guys, because I really want to target do it all guards. We've been talking about these guys all episode, right? Derek White, Josh Hart, Dyson Daniels. And I've said this guy's name before too. The guy that I really want to target next year is Christian Braun. The only concern I have here, we talked about the Malone situation. I don't think Malone leaving changes him, but if Malone leads to Jokic leaving, then I would reconsider this. But if Jokic is still on the Nuggets next year, I think Braun is going to have a huge role. He's going to be one of these guys that just can rack up stats left and right. Maybe one week it's points, maybe 1 week it's rebounds, the next it's assists. These are the glue guys on your fantasy roster, especially in category leagues, that can keep your team intact when injuries start to arise.
I would be completely as long as Nico Harrison doesn't go from the Mavericks to the Nuggets during the offseason, I would be completely shocked. Now, if I'm just saying this now, if Nico Harrison were to resign and go to the Nuggets, the Bulls would be a good landing spot for Nikola Jokic. If Nico Harrison is so inclined, he definitely fits with what we're trying to do in Chicago. What do you think about a Nikola Vucevic, Ayo Dosunmu, 2 first-round picks and 2 swaps? What do you think? Do you think maybe throw in a deep dish pizza too, and that'll seal the deal. Maybe they could throw in. Does Javon Carter have 1 year left? Maybe Taylor Horton-Tucker. He looked pretty good last night.
Oh yeah.
He's a free agent though.
Yeah. But, I don't think he's 29 or anything. He's 23.
Listen, all right, let's get the deal done. You can also have Patrick Williams. Okay, you can also have Patrick Williams.
Fine.
So Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Nikola Vucevic, 2 first-round picks and 2 swaps. 2 picks and 2 swaps for Nikola Jokic. Nico Harrison to the Nuggets. Let's get this done. All right. Now, that was kind of like Bulls Minute Part 2.
This is definitely the last episode of the season for sure.
Yeah. Ken Kreitz would have fit in well in this one because we have no structure. I apologize, everyone. All right, so my target for next season, one of my targets is Onyeka Okongwu. Now, he was stuck behind Clint Capella Last couple seasons, we've been clamoring for him to finally take over that starting job. He did that. He started the last 38 games, and over that stretch, he's averaged 15.3 points, 10 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.2 steals, and just under a block, shooting 58.4% from the field, 76.2% from the free throw line. He's not going to be in that upper tier of centers, obviously. He's probably not even in the second tier, the Karl Anthony Towns down that way. But probably around pick 50 is going to be my guess where he goes next season, somewhere 50 to 60 range, because he's going to be a sexy sleeper option. Everybody's going to be on him because everybody has been wanting him to start at center over Clint Capella for at least a season and a half now. He's finally taken that over. I will be happy drafting him in the, let's see. So if you're in a 12-team league, in the 5th round, somewhere around there, 4th or 5th round, maybe 6th if you get lucky, I would be more than happy to draft 5th or 6th round. If you could get Okongwu there, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. You just have to look at Clint Capella, where he finished. Like when he played in a lot of games with Trae Young or with James Harden, he was a top 60 guy. I think Okongwu has a higher upside than him, and if he's getting these minutes, we've talked about it. I feel like Nick has been talking about this for years. Like he just has to get the minutes. He just has to get the minutes, and he's got it now. It will be interesting to see like when Jalen Johnson comes back, what their rotation looks like with Johnson, Ricochet, and Okongwu. But I think Okongwu is a very solid play, and he has major upside going into next year too. I would worry a little bit about his price because you did say like everybody likes him, right? So
that's
like
going to be the worry. If he's going 3rd or early 4th, maybe not. Because you'll probably be able to get Zubac after him next season.
Yeah.
Just because it's not the young, sexy player. You might even be able to get Zubac after him. If that's the case, I would take Zubac. But if you can get him 5th or 6th round, I'd be comfortable with that.
Totally agree. All right, so my last guy, I'm going to the rookie well this year. He didn't play a lot, but this essentially all comes down to money for the Rockets. Reed Sheppard is a guy that I'm going to be very intrigued by this offseason. I was somewhat intrigued by him coming out of the draft, but I just was like, he's going to the Rockets. The Rockets are good. They got plenty of depth. There's just not going to be a role. So I wasn't high on him this year, but we saw what happened with Fred VanVleet. You know, he's been a mainstay in the what was that stat line of the week for all the wrong reasons, right? He's getting paid $45 million next season unless Houston decides to cancel the team option they have for next year. Sheppard was a lottery pick, so he's making $10 million. So essentially Houston has $55 million paying Fred VanVleet for this production while Reed Sheppard sits on the bench. They could very easily say, hey, let's start Reed. Let's bring in another guy that makes $30 million, maybe another defender, or who knows what happens or what weakness arises during the playoffs that they need to address. But I think Reed Sheppard could be the starting point guard for the Rockets next year. And if that's the case, his fantasy value would be insanely high. I'm not saying let's draft him at pick 50 or whatever, but if we can get him around pick 100, even if Fred VanVleet is on the team to start the season, who knows how long that leash will be. Obviously, he's getting paid $45 million, so probably pretty long. But I would be shocked if Houston picked up this option next year, if they don't, make a run to the finals. That's just way too much money to be paying a guy like Fred VanVleet for his production. But who knows? VanVleet's been a great postseason performer, so maybe he goes off in the postseason and they make a run and everything's fine. But Reed Sheppard is a guy waiting in the bushes for a huge opportunity and to take advantage of it.
He could also end up being the starting point guard for the Phoenix Suns. I mean, if you're looking, if the Rockets want to make a big splash, they have the depth to do it. If you want to package Reed Sheppard with Tari Eason or Jabari Smith or something like that and some picks, you can get probably just about anyone.
That's a great point. I should have thought about that too. If he gets traded anywhere, he'll be a starter.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
All right. My final target, I am going to go with a guy that everybody is down on right now. Immanuel Quickley. Now, he was one of the darlings heading into the season. Kieran was on him. I liked him too. Everything was set up for him to be successful. And then the injuries happened. He got hurt in the very first game of the season. He missed 8 games. He came back, played 2 games, got hurt again, and missed nearly 2 months. Now, when he did finally come back, the Raptors were basically out of it. So he's been resting all the time, almost a non-factor. But he did show his upside. He's averaged 17.4 points, 3.6 rebounds, just under 6 assists, and just over 2.5 3-pointers a game. So when he was on the floor, he was productive. Now you say, what are the Raptors going to look like next season? Well, Brandon Ingram is there, but guess what? Brandon Ingram's always hurt. So I'm not counting on Brandon Ingram to play more than 60 games. How is this team going to fit? Well, there's already been rumors that they're looking to move RJ Barrett. So if RJ Barrett gets moved and Brandon Ingram, who's always hurt, is going to be counted on to be someone important on this team, if Quickley just stays healthy, he's going to be great in fantasy next season. And he's not going to be drafted as high as he was this year, because when he got traded from the Knicks to the Raptors last year, his stats were awesome.
Yep.
So everybody thought this was the breakout campaign. His stats have been equally good. He just wasn't on the floor for the first basically half of the season. And then the second half, the Raptors have been out of it. So I'm going to buy the discount and be targeting Quickley next season.
And the injuries, like it's funny to say this after talking about Paul George and Joel Embiid and LaMelo Ball and saying like, oh, these guys are injury prone or whatever. But Quickley's injuries weren't really like the same injury over and over again. Yeah. It was like he like fell and like had like a pelvis contusion and didn't start the season, and then he had like a weird like shoulder injury. Like it was just like random things that aren't like, it's not like lower body injuries to a point guard that are just, you know, degenerative and they're just going to keep coming back and back again. It's just like he took a weird fall and had a bruise and then couldn't play for 2 weeks and then took a week to get back to conditioning. So like I'm not going to put Quickley as like an injury prone guy yet. Obviously that can change. And you look at like Scotty Barnes, obviously superstar fantasy player, but I don't think RJ Barrett is really a good fantasy player. That free throw percentage is horrendous. He doesn't make a lot of threes. So the pairing of Quickley and Barnes, you know, obviously maybe just because I'm a fantasy guy, that gets me really excited, and maybe that's what the Raptors think too. But I think that duo could make some hay. Jakob Poeltl had a pretty good season before injuries. Also, you know, injuries also cropped up. So yeah. I like what the Raptors are doing, and if they move on from RJ Barrett, Quickley ceiling gets even higher for me, for sure.
Now it's almost time for the final podcast of the season, for the best segment in all of the podcast universe. So go get Uncle Bob. Go get Aunt Janet. Go get Cousin Louise. Call your boss. Tell him to get out of the conference room. It's the last one of the season. But before we do that, we said we wanted to hear a couple of victory laps in the chat this week, and we have one here. Look at our good friend Christian Rogers. He says, injuries ruined me in all my championships and playoffs, but he made the playoffs in 7 of 8 leagues. Christian, you can't control injuries. Just get in the playoffs and then see what happens. I made the playoffs in all of my head-to-head leagues, and I didn't win any of them because that's just what happens sometimes. Guys get injured. So, Christian, we appreciate you watching the podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we appreciate everyone else on here, as well as our guy, Aaron Van Buren. He also won a championship. Congratulations, Aaron. One of our favorites, right, Kirien?
Absolutely, Aaron. Congratulations. I know we talked a little bit on Twitter. I also want to take this time, 300 people watching right now, end of the fantasy season. Really appreciate that. If you follow me on Twitter and you ask me any off-season questions, post-season questions, gambling questions, whatever, I'll answer them. I have a really bad social media following, so I need to up that. Ask any questions you want, and you know I'll respond as quickly as I can. Aaron, you know, reached out. I gave him a list of like 8 names, and only like 2 went off, but he still made the right choice and got the championship. So I want to help you guys out as much as possible, and in turn, hopefully grow my social media following. So shout out, Aaron. Appreciate you following and being a loyal follower, a loyal listener to the show all season.
And we also finally want to congratulate Mark, our last comment here in the chat. He said OG Anunoby carried him to a championship. What a great surprise there, too. Anunoby basically staying healthy for the vast majority of the season while playing a ton of minutes for Tibbs. That was certainly a surprise there.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Josh Hart, Cat, you know, Jalen Brunson a little bit this season too, but OG was great, and if you look at his stats at the last like 2 weeks, you can see why he carried you to a championship, Mark. OG really stepped up when it mattered most, especially when at this point in the season, a lot of guys aren't stepping up. They're resting or out injured. So glad you had OG on your roster and you followed our advice to draft as many Knicks as possible.
Congratulations on the championship, Mark. And with that, it's time for the What Was That stat lines of the week. Kirien, you are up first.
All right, so we got NBA history last Thursday. Giannis Antetokounmpo was the first player in NBA history to finish with at least 30 points, 20 assists, and 17 rebounds in a game. Got to give a big shout out to Giannis. Obviously, he's, arguably having one of his best statistical seasons of his career, but he's still not making any hay in the MVP race with Jokic and SGA. Dame is out, so Giannis is just, doing everything, averaging 33 points, 13 rebounds, and 13 assists over the last 4 games. Maybe Giannis is doing his best Jokic impression with Dame out. He's trying to rack up as many assists as possible. This performance was fantastic, and Giannis has been fantastic all season, and wanted to give him a shout out because he's probably not going to be taking home any hardware this season.
Yeah, great call there. Good final. What was that stat line of the week from Kirien? I am going to go with one final opportunity to rant about the Utah Jazz. I don't have any individual stat player here to give you, but the Jazz, after going 31-51 last season and showing some promise, have gone 16-63, and they have been resting guys since after Christmas. What was that? Utah Jazz. Lauri Markkanen has played 47 games. He's only averaged 31 minutes in those games, so even when he played, his minutes were down. John Collins played 40 games. He averaged just 30 minutes a game. Jordan Clarkson played 37 games. He averaged 26 minutes. That's 5 fewer minutes per game than last season. Walker Kessler, young, awesome fantasy stud, rebounds, blocks, high field goal percentage. He has played 58 games. They've been giving him rest for Walker Kessler. The Utah Jazz were even fined by the league at one point. It has not stopped anything. All it has done is make them play Colin Sexton. Well, guess what? Lauri Markkanen is still hurt. Walker Kessler has a concussion. Walker Kessler's been concussed for like 2 weeks. I think the fog has cleared. This is baloney. Utah Jazz, I hope you don't get anywhere near Cooper Flag. I hope you get the worst possible draft positioning you can get. And whoever you get, I hope he stinks. Because the Utah Jazz are everything that is wrong with the NBA right now. I'm okay with teams sitting veteran players in March. I'm okay with the joke that is Mr. February, Jeremy Grant. He books his vacations to start on March 10th because he doesn't play. He doesn't play because the Trailblazers think. I'm okay with veterans being rested in March and April. But when you're resting 23-year-olds in January, you stink. Utah Jazz, what was that?
All right, I only got 2 things before we get out of here. One, I'm going to blame the Keontae George situation on the Jazz tanking.
Do it, Kirien.
Keontae George, he's still great. I tried to make a joke on the Monday show. It kind of fell through. Waylon asked me, he was like, so who are you targeting next year? I was like, I think I'm going to double down on Keontae George again. And he didn't laugh. And so then I felt really awkward. So hopefully if we had any loyal listeners of the Wednesday show on the Monday show, you got my joke there. So yeah, hopefully, when the Jazz start taking winning seriously again, maybe Keontae George becomes a thing again, maybe not. And the other thing was the concussion, the 2 weeks out with the concussion. We're going really off the rails here. I'm going to be talking about my high school basketball days, but one of our best players on our team got a concussion. Really smart dude. And he was out for like 3 weeks with a concussion, and his dad was kind of a hardo, and he just kept making the excuse that my son is so smart that he tested so high on the baseline test for the concussion that he just can't pass that test anymore. He's just never going to be as smart as he was before this concussion.
So are you saying Walker Kessler is a Rhodes Scholar?
I don't know. I just thought this was a pretty funny story, and I wanted to throw it out on the airwaves. Hopefully the Van Heldens aren't listening. I do love Sean, and I love Bob, and I love their family. But that was a pretty hilarious story way back when. And when we're talking about concussions out for multiple weeks, it just triggered in my head, and I wanted to share it.
Well, in all sincerity, this is the first season that Kirien and I have hosted the Wednesday episode here of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We really appreciate everyone who watches on YouTube and listens through podcasts, whatever platform you use. This is not the last you're going to be hearing of us until next season. Go on rotowire.com. We'll have plenty of content on there. You can use promo code ROTO15 for 15% off any RotoWire product. There will be plenty of off-season content. As soon as we are allowed to be unleashed, we will start podcasting again, getting you ready for next season. Kirien, anything else you want to say before we head out of here?
No, absolutely. Just thanks one more time again to everybody, and thanks you to Mike. Obviously, if the listeners don't know, me and Mike have worked, editing articles, posting articles for a while together, but we had never really chatted. So this was, he's in New York, I'm in Wisconsin. So it's pretty awesome that we can do this together and bring in people from all over the country, all over the world. I feel pretty blessed and honored to have done this all season without getting fired.
And with that, that is the end of today's RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. May you all enjoy the offseason and enjoy those championship trophies.
Have a good one, everybody. Good luck in the postseason.